My name is Dr. Hilary Vidair, and I am the former ABCT Membership Issues Coordinator. I'm also an associate professor in the clinical PsyD program at Long Island University, the Post campus in New York. ABCT has been my professional home for 20 years now, and the organization played a key role in helping me successfully transition from a graduate student to an early career professional to where I am in my career today. In this video, I will aim to help you figure out if the PsyD degree might be something you want to pursue and factors to consider when applying to PsyD programs. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slide set and share it with all of you. And again, the title is PsyD the degree for you? Factors to consider when applying to graduate school. And this talk is sponsored by ABCT's Student Membership Committee. So you probably know by now that there are several types of degrees in mental health that you can pursue. There are master's degrees, for example, in social work, mental health counseling, and school psychology. And then there are 2 doctoral level degrees that can help train you to become a licensed psychologist: the PhD degree, which is the Doctor of Philosophy in Psychology, and the PsyD degree, which is the Doctor of Psychology. In order to understand the difference, first I want to walk you through a little bit of history of the PsyD degree. Originally in 1949, there was a conference focused on training doctoral level psychologists that ended up being coined the Boulder model. And the focus of the Boulder model was to train students in both science and practice and how to integrate the two. However, in the late 60s and the early 1970s, many professionals felt the need to create programs that focused solely on training practitioners for professional practice. This led to a conference in 1973, which led to what we call the Vail model. And from this model, we culminated into a practitioner's degree, or a PsyD degree, that we have today. There are 3 types of health services psychology PsyD degrees that students can receive today in areas of clinical psychology, counseling psychology, school psychology, and then some degrees combining those 3 areas. So, what are the differences between a PsyD degree and a PhD degree? One thing to ask yourself is, what are your career goals? PsyDs focus on training students for professional practice, whereas PhD programs tend to focus on training students to go into academia and to conduct clinical research. PsyD programs are training their students in scientific inquiry, including how to critically evaluate research. The goal, though, is really to help students become educated consumers of research rather than producers of research. The idea is that we want clinicians to be able to conduct evidence-based practice where their treatments do have empirical support behind them, and also teach them how to evaluate their clients, their intervention progress, and even evaluate programs that they're developing or conducting in professional organizations. There are some other differences between PsyD and PhD programs that are important to highlight. One is that PsyD programs tend to have higher acceptance rates, as well as larger class sizes of students. In addition, PsyD programs really focus on accepting you into a program, whereas a lot of PhD programs focus on accepting you to work with a particular faculty member. A PsyD program may assign you a mentor to work with, but a lot of the times they're having you accepted into the program as opposed to a certain professor's lab. PsyD programs also generally focus on a shorter duration of training because students often aren't doing dissertations that take as long to complete. And PsyD programs generally tend to have less funding available because faculty are focused more on practice generally than on obtaining grant funding. In a PsyD program, you're generally going to have clinically focused classes, although you also will have research classes in the spirit of teaching you how to be an educated consumer of research. And students can complete research projects, but they're often projects related to clinical work. There are some common myths about PsyD programs that you're likely to encounter as you navigate the application process. The first one is that a PsyD is considered sort of less than a PhD degree. Actually, I would say that the PsyD degree is optimal for students who are certain that their primary focus is on learning how to practice. This is because students will be surrounded by peers who are also eager to build careers as practitioners, and the faculty's main goal is to train students how to do tasks like conduct therapy, assessment, and even supervision. A second myth is that PsyD programs do not have research requirements. This isn't the case. APA considers research and evaluation a core competency of psychology doctoral training. PsyD programs typically include research courses, and students are expected to become knowledgeable about research methods and the conduct of research in applied settings. Students are also taught to think of themselves as local clinical scientists who are developing hypotheses and assessing progress of their individual clients. Most PsyD programs also have their students complete a dissertation, though the possible types of dissertations that students conduct are often broader than PhD programs and can include non-empirical projects, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Another myth is that APA accredited internships are more difficult to obtain if you're a PsyD student as compared to a PhD student. Actually, if you go and review the data on the APA website, PsyD program students matched over 90% of the time in the last couple of years. So that doesn't seem to be too much of a concern. And finally, another myth about PsyD programs is that you cannot teach with a PsyD degree. Although it is true that most students in PsyD programs do not wish to pursue a primarily academic career, many do serve as adjunct professors at the undergraduate, master's, and doctoral levels, and also teach in the medical field. Some master's and PsyD programs also hire PsyD faculty full-time, particularly for clinically focused courses. Although some of the facts I mentioned earlier might have made it sound like PsyD versus PhD programs are categorically different, I would actually say that how clinical or research focused a program is more on a continuum, like this Likert scale you see here on the screen. So if you take a look at 1, we have more practice oriented programs, all the way up to 7, where we have more research oriented programs. As shown here, most practice-oriented and most PsyD programs tend to rate themselves between a 1 and a 3. So it's helpful as an applicant if you have a general sense of where you might fall on this Likert scale. And some applicants hover around a 4, which is an equal emphasis between clinically oriented and research-oriented. And those types of applicants tend to apply to both PsyD and PhD programs, and then they assess how well they fit once they attend interviews and get to know more information about each program. There's an amazing book that I have the citation in the bottom left of the slide called The Insider's Guide to Graduate Programs in Clinical and Counseling Psychology by Sayet and Norcross. This book is really a must for anyone thinking about applying to doctoral programs in health services psychology. The authors cover everything you need to know about the application process, about interviewing, and details of specific accredited doctoral programs to help you decide where you want to go. The most recent version was published in 2020, and it is regularly updated. So now that I've covered some of the major characteristics of PsyD programs, I'll tell you a little bit about accreditation and where to find accredited PsyD programs. The American Psychological Association, or APA, accredits health services psychology programs, and in order to obtain accreditation, programs have to go through an intensive self-study process, including site visits and regular reports about their progress and their student outcomes to APA. There are currently, as of October 2020, 411 APA accredited health services psychology doctoral programs, 99 of which are PsyD programs. Specifically, there are 71 clinical psychology doctoral programs that are PsyD, 10 counseling programs, 11 school psychology programs, and 7 programs that are combined across the 3 areas. The largest number of programs accredited by APA that are PsyD are in the state of California, followed by Pennsylvania, and then New York. In Canada, there's a Canadian Psychological Association that manages accreditation, and as of now, there are 4 accredited clinical PsyD programs in Canada. And overall, PsyD programs can be found in 3 types of locations. One is in psychology departments within universities, Another is university-affiliated psychology schools. And the third are freestanding independent schools. Now I'll tell you a little bit about what you can expect in terms of attending a PsyD program and its components. So all PsyD programs involve coursework, and you usually start off in first year with some theoretical coursework, and then you go into research and some non-clinical course content as required by APA. In terms of clinical training, once you start more practice-oriented coursework, you often then start conducting practicum or externship experiences as well. So these are really part-time placements where you're getting practice in clinical counseling or school psychology. And then students typically go on to engage in a full-time year-long accredited internship in their 5th year. Most PsyD programs do culminate in a dissertation, often with a practical focus. So there is a large variety of types of dissertations, and depending on the program, you may have more options than others. Most PsyD programs will allow students to conduct what we call quantitative research. So some examples include single case design or survey studies. Some programs also allow students to pursue qualitative research, for example, in-depth interviews designed to understand the experiences of a particular group. And this is really great because qualitative research tends to mirror experiences in clinical practice where you'd be interviewing people. And then some PsyD programs, it's more rare, but some do allow various types of non-empirical dissertation projects. For example, some projects focused on developing a theory or conducting a critical evaluation of literature. Some also allow you to develop a program or write an extended clinical case evaluation as your dissertation. So now that I've reviewed the components of PsyD programs, let's talk a little bit about the components of the application. There are 4 main components to an initial application: academic requirements, clinical and/or research experience, your personal statement, and letters of recommendation. These components are expected by most PsyD programs, and the goal at this point is really focusing on getting in the door to get an interview. This is another time where you might want to check out the Insider's Guidebook I mentioned before, because they have great application tips, including how to navigate the interview process. For now, I will provide an overview of the 4 components of the application. So first, we'll talk about academic requirements. And many PsyD programs place their recommended or average student GPA and GRE scores right on their website. So I would encourage you to look at websites of any particular programs you're interested in. The general GRE includes a verbal section, a quantitative section, and a writing section. And the general GRE typically is required by PsyD programs. One of the nice things about the GRE is that you can take the test multiple times, and there are books and training courses that can help you if you feel the need to improve your score. The psychology GRE test is also something that many PsyD programs require, and it is important to check the test dates for the psychology GRE because it is not offered as often as the general GRE. So you'd want to think about that when you're considering your timeline for application. You also want to check each program's prerequisite course list. Most programs will expect you to have taken some psychology courses, such as Introduction to Psychology, Research Methods, Statistics, sometimes abnormal psychology if you're attending a clinical program. And then especially if you weren't a psychology major in college, some programs do look for a certain number of credits within psychology as prerequisites for applying. So next, we're talking about clinical and/or research experience. Because a PsyD degree is primarily focused on practice, faculty do like to see you gain some exposure to helping people in a formal capacity. Now, it can be challenging to obtain clinical experience before attending graduate school, and faculty know that. So this slide provides some examples of the types of experiences that are common for applicants to obtain prior to applying. They include crisis or domestic violence hotlines, opportunities with children, such as after-school programs, summer camps and youth centers, inpatient units and residential centers, and peer mentoring programs, including college campus programs. Some applicants also seek out opportunities shadowing what it's like in the day of a psychologist or a counselor. And then PsyD programs tend to place less emphasis on having research experience compared to PhD programs. However, serving as a research assistant or a research coordinator on a study can really provide you with helpful information, both clinically and interpersonally, in terms of the kinds of interactions you'd be pursuing as a doctoral student. For example, you could be recruiting participants, you could be learning how to conduct diagnostic interviews, you could serve as a therapist on a research study, or you could help coordinate participants or staff. College is a great time to start accumulating these experiences, but if you didn't get to do so as part of college, don't worry, there is still time. There are a lot of people who choose to do somewhat of a gap year or a post-baccalaureate experience where they gain clinical and or research experience as they're pursuing their application process. And you can also work on forming relationships with professionals in that time who would be able to help you write letters of recommendation for your application. You can also consider continuing in a master's degree program at this point, or gaining initial job or career experience before applying. Some people who apply to PsyD programs actually do so after spending time in a whole other career. So there is always time to gain these experiences. They really do help you figure out the type of work that you want to do and the degree that you would like to pursue. So it's beneficial beyond the application. The next part of the application that I want to talk about is the personal statement. And this is where you showcase your experiences and talk about why you want to become a psychologist trained by a particular program. It is common to begin with how you became interested in psychology. Was there a particular experience that you were first intrigued by? There are some different opinions in terms of how personal to make the beginning of your personal statement. Some PsyD faculty actually like when students open up about their personal and family background, things that led them to the field, while others suggest keeping your commentary to more professional experiences. A good recommendation is to seek mentorship on how you present anything personal that you plan to write about from faculty that you trust. Next, you will want to write a little bit about your clinical and research experiences, but remember, anyone reviewing your application has access to your CV or your list of experiences, so you do not want to repeat this information in the same manner. Instead, you want to give the reader some insight into what you learned from these experiences. Provide examples that highlight what you learned, showcase your clinical skills or your research skills, and describe how these experiences led you to seek your next experience. In other words, tell a story about your journey and what propelled you forward. You will then want to describe your current training and career goals. What is it you're hoping to achieve by attending a PsyD program? And what are you hoping to gain by attending this particular program? That's really important. Research the program ahead of time and provide examples of parts of the program that you're eager to participate in. The key is to describe your background and interests and how they make you an ideal match for training in a particular PsyD program. As I mentioned earlier, you'll likely be accepted into a program rather than to work with a particular faculty member. At the same time, it is useful to write about one or two faculty that you could see yourself working with, as it illustrates you are familiar with the types of research or applied work they are doing. You'll want to leave yourself a lot of time to work on this statement. Honestly, a lot of people spend several months working on it, and it's common and expected to write it and rewrite it and get feedback from several different people before you finalize your statement. Spend time seeking feedback from several people, including professors, mental health professionals, and anyone you know who's been successful with submitting applications and getting into graduate school. I know it's hard to receive feedback on your writing at times, and at the same time, it's better to receive that feedback now before you submit your application. The last component of the application I will cover is letters of recommendation. It is common for programs to request 3 letters, and I recommend having at least one of the letters come from an academic source. Ideally, this is someone who knows you better than just being in their class. So for example, perhaps you took several classes with them, you conducted research with them, maybe they were your honors thesis mentor, or you regularly attended office hours and talked to them about your interests and your goals. All letters of recommendation should be from professionals who know you well and can provide specific examples of your academic abilities, clinical skills or research skills, and your interpersonal abilities. In order to facilitate a strong letter, you want to ask your recommenders for letters in advance. You can also ask them what resources might be helpful for them to review while they're writing your letter, such as your personal statement or your CV. You might also suggest that you can provide them with a bullet-pointed list of tasks that the two of you have worked on together. Be sure that you're clear. You're only offering this as a suggestion if it helps facilitate their letter writing, not that you expect them to write about certain points. All right, so now that I've explained a good deal about the PsyD degree and the application, maybe you're wondering, where is the PsyD for me? So it's a really good question, and I took some advice based on an article by a graduate student named Tartakovsky. She's cited below, and she outlined some key factors to consider when choosing a doctoral program. One key factor is if the program is accredited. This is because future job prospects and some internships will really be looking for applicants from an accredited program. Some licensing boards also want to see people graduate from an accredited program. And this is because accreditation assumes that a program adhered to specific standards of training. A second factor is if the program feels like a good fit. And I admit this isn't necessarily so scientific. Fit is more of a gut feeling. It's a gut sense of if you feel at home, for example, during the interview process. Can you see yourself spending 4 years in residence there before you go on to internship? A third factor includes unique program experiences. Does the program have a concentrated focus in certain areas? What about any types of specific clinical opportunities or research opportunities? Are they things that would interest you? Are there lab experiences or student groups that you could see yourself participating in? Another factor is to find out what alumni are doing. So when you hear about the kinds of careers that graduates from the program have, does it seem that these are things that you would want to pursue? What seems possible after graduating from this program? And obtaining current students' feedback about their experiences, as well as strengths and weaknesses that they see about the program, can really be helpful. So when you do get to the interview stage, I do encourage you to ask faculty and students what they like most about the program, what they like least about the program, and any questions that can help you obtain valuable information that can't just be gleaned off of the website. It can, of course, also be useful to make data-driven decisions. So much of the information on this slide can be found on specific programs' websites. One is about cost, practically how much is tuition, and is there any funding to offset that cost? Second, what is the program's typical class size, and what class size are they aiming for in the year you would be attending? Also, what is the faculty-student ratio? This can give you a general idea of how much individualized attention you may be able to receive. How long does it typically take students to complete the program, and what are their graduation rates? You also want to look at their latest internship match rates to get a sense of how they're doing in the accredited internship match process, and what percentage of recent graduates have become licensed and passed the licensing exam, which is referred to as the EPPP. Finding out the answers to these questions can help you make an informed decision about the PsyD program you'll want to attend. I want to take a moment to explain how organizations like ABCT can help you at this point in your training and beyond. As a student or a post-baccalaureate, joining ABCT can provide you with opportunities to meet and network with mental health professionals and students. I know as a student that I was always amazed when I attended ABCT conventions or participated in ABCT listserv conversations and was able to interact with an expert treatment developer or researcher that I read about in my graduate school textbooks. You can also meet students who have successfully made their way through the application process, who can share application tips or knowledge about the kind of work that you would like to pursue. And you can connect with other people who are applying to graduate school when you will be. There are numerous benefits to being an ABCT member. For example, students enjoy reduced membership and convention fees. They can also join special interest groups, which we refer to as SIGs, and there are over 40 groups within ABCT that focus on a particular area of interest. The annual convention also includes several clinically focused offerings. For example, mini workshops are part of the conference registration fee and often include learning how to conduct treatment techniques with clients. We also have clinical roundtables and panel discussions where you can hear from experts in the field. Typically, we also have a panel on getting into graduate school, which is actually free even if you do not register for the convention. And right afterward, the SIGs have a poster session where you can network and meet professionals, including people who work in some of the programs you may be applying to. During the year, we also have clinically focused webinars with a discounted student rate. Students also get to participate in ABCT's email listserv, have journal access to 2 journals. One is cognitive and behavioral practice, and the other is behavior therapy, and receive a newsletter 8 times a year called TBT, which stands for the behavior therapist. Students also have access to our website, including a graduate mentorship directory, and we are adding faculty who work in PsyD programs all the time. And students also have access to ABCT's job bank, as well as a Find a Therapist directory. I want to draw your attention in particular to part of the website that focuses on ABCT student resources. There is a general student resources page that can be found using the link below. You'll find several amazing sources of information there, including the graduate mentorship directory that I mentioned, and also how to get more involved in ABCT, which I highly recommend. And I have a link to specific sets of resources on getting into graduate school. So there's a number of fantastic resources, including a great video on getting into graduate school that's focused more on the PhD application process. So I encourage you to watch that as well as you're making your decisions. And there are some wonderful additional resources, including a description of life in various CBT graduate programs, including a PsyD program, a recommended timeline to follow for applying, which includes some great interviewing tips, and an Excel spreadsheet that's designed to help you organize information about each school you plan to apply to. I hope the information in this presentation has been helpful to you as you consider the application process and if you want to apply for a PsyD degree. We at ABCT aim to support you in your career as a graduate student eager to pursue behavior therapy. In time, I do hope that you find a professional home in ABCT just like I did, and we wish you the best of luck with the application process and beyond. Thank you for watching.